happy Halloween, and welcome back to Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film.
Supposedly.
Maybe I shouldn't have opened on a joke.
No, you have to keep it in theme, Zach. It has to be... There we go.
Oh my god. The bus is off the rails and haunted this time.
I know already. We couldn't even get 2 feet. Anyhow, we're experimenting with something kind of new here. It hasn't been that long since we were gone, but this is sort of the flagship Cookie Pocket Halloween special. We may or may not do more of these in the future, but for now we're going to try it out, and we are talking about The Exorcist, written by William Peter Blatty, Cookie Pocket's alum. He also wrote and directed The Ninth Configuration, which we watched last season, and directed by William Friedkin, well known for directing The French Connection, Sorcerer, a multitude of really, really, really good movies. The Exorcist has kind of an iconic and really well-known plot. It's basically about Chris McNeil, who is a famous actress living in Washington, D.C. for a film, and her daughter Reagan, played by Linda Blair, suddenly starts to act very strange, and no doctor can explain why. So finally, Chris has to turn to religion and a priest to hopefully get an exorcism to save Reagan's life. Let's not beat around the bush. What did you guys think of The Exorcist?
Well,
Christian can go first. How do you feel?
Pretty pedantic for giving it a 4.5 instead of a 5. But obviously, this is a tremendous work. Everything is just as nuanced as it needs to be, and there are so many moments that are just absolutely horrifying. And Zach has put me through the ringer at this point. I've seen a whole host of John Carpenter films and other classics like Psycho and Alien and what have you, and I'm fairly desensitized to horror. I don't feel like maybe like the most awful film would give me nightmares, but like Hereditary did not, for example. So I'm pretty much like over the hump, I think. But there are genuinely frightening moments in this for me, whereas like for something like The Thing, I'm looking like, oh, that's a cool effect, but I'm not really like jumping in my seat per se. This, like, I was like, oh my god, I said that audibly, and I was watching this in a library with headphones on. So I mean, yeah, and
hey, what you watching there, sport?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like this like Kids' Choice Awards slime is just all over the screen, and I'm like, oh my goodness. It was a good time, but and I'm looking at the release date here, 1973. 4 years before Star Wars, 2 years before Jaws. I mean, this could be like...
She referenced...
I feel like this is...
Yeah.
I do.
Like as influential, if not more influential than those two. Or certainly as groundbreaking and probably more groundbreaking than those two. I was just really, really shook. I didn't anticipate the scares in particular to be on this level. And... Some issues that I have with other horror movies is it feels like characterization is sacrificed for scares, or plot is sacrificed for scares, and it never felt to me like any other factor was sacrificed to preserve horror. So just all in all, skillfully directed, well written, well acted, 4.5 out of 5. I feel like kind of a jerk for not giving it a 5, but I do reserve my 5s for like absolute opuses as for me. Mm-hmm. But this is obviously great, and I recommend it to anyone.
Well, unlike Mad Max, this is an opus, okay? All right? If they just gave her a horse, we wouldn't have had this problem. She expressed her one and only desire. She's like, what do you mean you want a horse? No, get that out of here. Look what happened. Look what happened. All right? You get tossed down the Joker stairs. And that's it. It's depressing, okay? So, which apparently Zach has seen before, which is pretty amazing. I want to see those. Yes. I'm not going to go down them, but I might go up them a couple steps. Yeah, I'm done. Anyway, yeah, this is pretty iconic. I've seen this a couple times a while ago, and it was a very good experience seeing it with other people that also all liked it very much, even the one that hates horror movies. But yeah, I honestly think every single shot looks amazing. It's not like 2001 where it's like everything's like a wide shot and it's like you have to take it all in kind of thing. Every shot is super well intentioned, and I guess the most recent thing I've seen that's like it is Ex Machina, but I mean, I don't know. I feel so bad talking about how great shots look, and Zach's just looking at me like, oh yeah.
No.
Yeah, good job, Laban. You're progressing. But anyway, Yes, it was magnificently directed. I mean, the writing is just everything is so well timed. The timing for everything is great. The timing for the shots, the timing for the sound mixing. I mean, like the score completely is dead when terrible things are happening at that climax, especially. And it's just like I don't know. There's really not much you can say that hasn't already been said. The possession sequence can never be redone. I mean, never have I don't think I've ever seen. There might be a couple that are kind of close and a little bit more creative, but for the most part, I mean, all that build up about faith and those things, and just like just kind of grounding itself early on, and using all of that air to build this atmosphere, and then just excessively pummeling the viewer with it at the end, I think is a great strategy that almost no horror movie really replicated the way that this has done it. So yeah, I mean, the effects are perfectly effective, perfectly used. I mean, yeah, the slime is kind of a meme, but otherwise, I mean, the
Well, I think it works. I just laughed that it was green, and someone in Letterboxd called it.
Yeah.
Said
yeah, it
Jack
works.
Black jumped out. I don't know.
And it's
Kirsten Runquist. Yeah, I've seen that review.
And
Yeah.
it's only used like a few times, so but at the same time, you have to have contrast with the blood and everything, and for sure, horror movies use way too much blood in general. Like honestly, I mean, it's almost never warranted now. Movies, especially about demonic possession and things like that. I mean, and just like the over excessive like twisting and crawling on walls and ceilings and stuff, or just her levitating off the bed and them compelling her is like so intense. Like you cannot not be captivated by that. And it's just everything feels so raw and real. That actual like that pre-MRI whatever it's called thing that they were doing.
Yeah.
I've heard that's one of the more scarier scenes, especially when it came out. People were like fainting and stuff. And that was like a little cringy. I was like, ew, that's gross when I saw it. But,
God, it's horrible.
But yeah, and just the general aspects of like the failures of like psychologists and doctors, kind of just like, yeah, we're experts in our work, and then what's his name later on is like, there are no experts, which is exactly how it plays out. And then the same thing with faith and the priests losing faith, so it's like nothing matters, classical Zach Garrigus cynicism. It's perfect. But yeah, 5 out of 5. Honestly, there's really not anything I would change. I think the build up is perfect, and the timing for everything is really like the main things that stay consistent the whole time.
Well, I'm really glad we all liked this one. I was a little worried, as I always am when I suggest classics, that this was going to be another Jaws for Christian, and that this was going to get like
more credit,
a 2 or 3 out of 5. But I'm really glad to see that you guys enjoyed it. I absolutely love this movie. It's definitely a 5 out of 5 for me. In terms of enjoyment, I bring up Exorcist 3 all the time. I really do like Exorcist 3. I think it's on kind of almost an even keel with this original film. But this one, you can't deny the impact that this had on horror and on film in general. You're correct in saying, Christian, that this was a major blockbuster hit at the time. Like Mitchell mentioned, it had a huge impact on the nation. People lined up around the block to see it. It was a major blockbuster. The news, to no end, covered how people were fainting, asking to leave the theater, vomiting during scenes throughout the film, because I think it really is daring and deeply disturbing in a way that a lot of horror at this time really wasn't. Mm-hmm. And additionally, I think nowadays we've sort of been dulled to the idea of a possession or an exorcism. Yeah. But in the 70s, exorcism, like they said in this film, was kind of just sort of an embarrassing, like dated, like we used to do that type thing in the Catholic Church that nobody really like referred to that often. It wasn't like a thing known in pop culture. This movie kind of brought back the idea of an exorcism as a thing in pop culture and really startled people and frightened people in a way that has led that to be a lasting horror concept even to today. I mean, we get like 3 exorcism movies a year featuring contortion and popping bones and a million things that are far, far less subtle than basically anything that you see in this movie. I think the casting is absolutely brilliant. There were a lot of big names that they wanted to cast in roles throughout this film. Like they wanted Jane Fonda and Audrey Hepburn or Anne Bancroft for the mother, Chris, who all proved unavailable, except for Jane Fonda, who, pardon my French, but I think this is really funny, said that she didn't want to do it because she thought it was capitalist rip-off bullshit.
High school.
high school.
Well, that does sound like Jane Fonda.
But I think we ended up with a great set of actors. In particular, I think Jason Miller is so good as Father Karras, and this was his first time doing anything for a film. Before this, he was mainly a playwright. I think this is one of those movies where everything comes together so well for a cohesive and really, really effective experience. I guess we've all mentioned that we thought this movie was frightening and jarring, but I do want to get to the heart of that a little more. It's kind of a trend nowadays, I think. A lot of young people, it's the Halloween season. They decide, you know what? I'm going to watch The Exorcist. It's a horror classic. Maybe I'm going to react to it on my YouTube channel. And then they go ahead and they give it a watch, and then they come away thinking like, well, that was boring. So I want to discuss this. What do we think is frightening about this movie, and how do we think those scares are maybe different from something that a younger audience would expect nowadays?
Well,
anybody can step up to the plate.
Well, I want my participation points, teacher. I think that, like I had mentioned, like kind of like the setup is important, having that kind of the normalcy settle in, kind of like Stephen King-esque kind of setting up the stage for everything being really normal, and then just taking the normal and completely destroying it, as in many ways, as in many directions as possible. I think it totally works here. I think that the scenes that are actually horrifying, like I guess if you had it in writing, or if you like tried to describe it to somebody, it would sound really scary. Well, oh man, let me try to censor myself here. Repeatedly taking a cross and doing things with it to your inner thigh area.
Yes.
And then yelling expletives in a demonic voice. That sounds like we've heard that a million times. It's been done a million times before. But it's all about the walking up the stairs and walking into the room and then opening the door and seeing it happening. And then seeing this 12-year-old child with this very intensely put on realistic looking makeup. And then in this empty room, but she's like the main focus of it, in this bed that's all like covered up and stuff that where she's tied to it or whatever. But it's just like the focus is really important. Like everything is always led up to, and there's always a resolution for everything. It's not just constant door opens, and the silverware everywhere. I know I'm pressing a soundboard right now. But anyway,
he's got his keyboard there.
Yeah,
his Moog synthesizer.
High school. But anyway, yeah, it's like that's really what's effective about it. And obviously there's a level that's you can see that it's from the 70s, but the practical effects are a big focus, and I think that also helps a lot. Much like The Thing. The Thing is obviously a bigger achievement for practical effects, I would say, because they're used way more often and more creatively. But overall, like I said, the themes that are constantly there, the acting obviously is insane. I think it's totally believable, highly realistic. I mean, honestly, you wouldn't really have to tell me that this is based off of a true story, because it kind of feels like it is. There's just something about it that feels like, yeah, this definitely like could have happened, but it's an isolated incident, and it doesn't feel like it's narrated, or it doesn't feel like it's come out of somebody's mind. It feels like it's come right out of real life, and I think the things that I mentioned really exemplify that.
All right.
Man, Mitchell, you are setting the comedic bar so high today. I feel like I've laughed more in this episode than I did in our last 5 altogether. Thank goodness.
I was laughing when they opened the door and the detective was there. He's like,
"Oh yeah."
I laughed so hard. That was the funniest part. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's like what you said in your opening comments, Mitchell. I feel like there's nothing I can say about this that hasn't already been said. So, I'll try. But what makes this scary? I think it's the people, and I mean, like, obviously the performances are absolutely essential and huge, but what I mean by the people is as much as the actors are the characters. Like our priest that's struggling with his faith, and our mother who's just like absolutely desperate and doing the absolute most she can, which is close to nothing, because she can't really do anything. And this is like part of why I get invested in other genre films. Is I'm very much like a character-oriented person, generally speaking. I want someone that I can relate to, or someone that I can sympathize with if I can empathize with them. And everyone here feels very, very, very real. And even if you're not religious or a mother or a kid who's being possessed by Satan.
We know
Oh my
there's some
God,
of you out
Christian,
there.
that is like totally me.
3% of Cookie Pocket's audience are children that are possessed by demons.
We're praying for you, 3%. At least I am.
Remember the
No, the characters. I feel so much more. If it was just like Pennywise turning his head like 180 degrees, I'd be like, oh, it's Pennywise. But it's this kid, and you feel awful for this child who has no control over what's happening to her, and so it's like, it's one of the most effective and different ways of harnessing empathy, because usually, in my experience, empathy is used to buy into like a hero's journey or to make a positive resolution feel like really, really satisfying at the end of a movie when the hero like wins, and it's just used in kind of the opposite sense here, and it's just immensely effective.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've really hit the nail on the head there in terms of the characters being the important thing here, and really the people being the important thing. I don't really think, this is obviously a horror movie, but I don't think it's a scary movie. This is really, I think, more of a horror drama, because I think the most frightening stuff in this is not, oh my goodness, she just vomited up green slime, her head is spinning around. Like, I think that's the appeal that a lot of modern possession films go for, like those gross out, flashy, demonic moments. But I think the really frightening, effective stuff in this is something is wrong with my daughter, and nobody can tell me what it is. Some of the scariest stuff in this, I think, are the scenes with doctors just sitting around going, it could be this? And
It's the temporal lobe.
You
It's
can
the
tell
temporal
that they're just
lobe.
making
Oh, God,
things up,
yeah.
going back to the temporal lobe, because it's all that they know, and they're absolutely stumped. Like you mentioned, Mitchell, the scene where she gets I think it's a cardioencephalogram. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's an outdated examination, but where they're piercing her neck, and she has to be conscious the entire
the worst
time,
part.
or the operation won't work. Like, that's an actual procedure they did in the 70s, and it's so frightening to watch. And that's just like medical drama. Like, there's not really even anything demonic going on in that scene. But at the same time, later scenes where Reagan is being forced to do horrible, horrible things to herself are also really frightening, but they're not frightening in a way that makes you go, ah, they're frightening in a way that, like, makes you want to cry.
You're like,
And I think that's also down to the editing. There are so many sequences in this where Reagan does something truly awful, and then it just cuts, and you have no time at all to, like, relax from that moment. You're just left with a jarring, like, oh my God, that just happened, and you're just kind of left to sit with that while, like, Damien walks around in a wide shot or something. It's a movie that's constructed to upset you in a really deep and really human way. I couldn't imagine anybody watching this and not being at least a little put off by something. That being said, a lot of young people have been conditioned to think that a scary movie is a movie that makes you go, ha, every 5 seconds, and then you throw your popcorn in the air, and at the end, the demon pops out and goes, and then the credits roll. And
Virgin
that is
Mary
not this kind of
statue.
movie.
Oh.
That is not this kind of movie at all. This is not sinister. This is not, I mean, Mr. Boogie is not going to jump up in this movie. But I do think there's a really deep sense of, like, soul horror here that's really effective for basically anybody if they understand what they're getting into. Now, I'd also like to talk religion for a moment, if we can. We brought up this discussion when we talked about the ninth configuration. I think it's important to talk about it here as well. William Peter Blatty, who wrote this and also produced it, so he had a big effect on the film, including hiring William Friedkin as director. He was Catholic, yes, he was. He's dead at this point. He was a very Catholic man, and so religion was very important to him. And he stated that he wanted The Exorcist to be a sermon that no one could possibly sleep through. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask, do you think that this is a Christian film, or do you think it's a film that simply uses Christian iconography to make a more secular point?
That's a good question.
Go ahead, Christian.
Do I think Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Yeah, I mean, I guess, I think it's I think it's used very effectively. It never feels preachy, at least not to me. I don't know if you guys felt differently, but I think it's so much more interesting and realistic to show a priest that struggles with his faith than someone who's just like a gung-ho go Jesus guy, you know. And I think it's a much more realistic representation of any religious person. I think that's really a part of anyone's. I think anyone that considers themselves deeply religious will tell you that it's never like a constant thing, and so I appreciated that was portrayed in the way that it was, and then of course that feeds into the empathy of the character, and the monster possessed Satan whatever takes advantage of the way that he's questioning his faith and the troubles he's having with his mother. So I think it's a Christian film? I don't know. I feel like the ending is dismal enough that it's not totally clear. I wouldn't say that this is like because he dies. I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
So I guess a sort of a sub question to that, which I think also ties into Blatty's intention here. Do you think the ending is the devil winning? Or who do you think is victorious at the end of this film?
Not humanity, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely not. I want to believe that he's going to heaven. I feel like that's probably... No,
This is definitely a discussion that Blatty had when he was developing the
No,
this
I
is
feel
a
like...
discussion we should have.
In all seriousness, I feel like that's what Blatty wants us to think.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
you know. And given, I mean, examining this as a work of fiction, absent of whether you personally believe in heaven or not, I would like to believe that this character ends up in heaven.
Yeah. Mitchell.
My
Thoughts?
name ain't Christian. Between Triumph of the Will and VeggieTales, I would leans more towards VeggieTales.
Okay.
I don't know.
So it's not a piece of Nazi propaganda. That's good to know.
Okay. All right, listen. All right.
Oh no, we might get blocked on YouTube because
No,
of
I'm
that.
just-
It's not a piece of National Socialist propaganda.
That doesn't help, okay? You just, you know what, whatever. Okay, anyway. VeggieTales, right? So, yes, I think this, yeah, I pretty much exactly agree with Christian. I wouldn't say the devil's winning. I think it's not really meant to have kind of a conclusive, like, good evil ending kind of thing. I feel like it's not ambiguous really, but it kind of is. It's morally ambiguous on purpose, and I think it's definitely up to interpretation. But honestly, I feel like the ending doesn't really matter as much as what was leading up to it. Everything that Christian said about the doubting of faith and things like that, I do feel like that is pretty realistic and pretty integral to having true faith, and I think a lot of Christians that I know definitely feel like that. I go to a Jesuit university, so definitely a lot of doubting of faith going on around these parts, in these walls. But I think to an extent it's a Christian story. It's not like it's about the story really. It's not really about the events that transpire. So yeah.
I think I agree with both of you guys. I do think, though, that interpretation of the ending is definitely going to be affected by which cut you watch. We should bring that up. There's two different cuts of this movie. There's the original theatrical cut, and then there's a later cut, often referred to as the version you've never seen, which was released in the early 2000s, which is sometimes called a director's cut, but it's really more of a writer's cut. It's Blatty's preferred cut of the movie. And in the theatrical cut, we end with Father Dyer looking down the stairs and then just walking away, which is rather a depressing kind of, well, that happened and life goes on type ending. In the writer's cut, you don't end on quite that sour note. You do end on a moment that I think is meant to maybe create more of a sense of this was done for something. Essentially, Father Dyer walks away and then he meets Detective Kinderman, and they have a conversation about Father Karras, and then they decide, you know what, let's go to the movies. And so there's that little moment of optimism at the end that kind of calls back to Kinderman's discussion with Karis previously in the movie, where they had that interaction about like, oh, well, you look like Paul Newman. Do you want to go see a movie? So there's that kind of like a little callback that sort of ends it on a more optimistic note, and I think pushes Blatty's point, because Blatty notoriously has said like, I don't want him to think the devil won, and I think that comes across. Particularly, I think a lot of people, when they think of the ending, some people think like, oh my goodness, well, the demon forced Karis to jump out the window, which I don't think is the case at all. I think it's very obvious that Karis is sacrificing himself for the child, which I think, I mean, there's lots of different religious interpretations of martyrdom and whether or not it's a good or bad thing. It's a very layered concept that I'm not totally qualified to talk about, but I do think he incidentally kills himself for the right reason and for the right cause. And I think it makes the film sort of about the triumph of faith through humanity for greater good. I think really this is a movie that I don't necessarily know if it's a sermon. I don't think that if you're not a religious person, you'll go into this movie and come out the other side and say, well, I think I ought to go down to my church this Sunday. I'm convinced.
I want to be an army chaplain.
I do think that this is a movie about faith in the real world. Like you said, Christian, these priests feel like people. I mean, they smoke, they drink in their off time, they like to play the piano and hang out with friends, which you almost never see with priests in any other movie. Priests are essentially, in any other horror movie, are there to quote the Bible, to exorcise things, and to study the Bible in their private rooms. That's pretty much all they ever do in other horror movies. But here, they're actual characters, and they're actual people. And I do think they at least bring a Christian understanding to a story that might not necessarily be approved of by Christian Nana.
I feel like if Christian Nana is like super Christian Nana, then maybe, but I really don't. I didn't perceive any of this as offensive, honestly, at all. I think it's pretty widely acceptable. And also to address your sort of martyrdom point, it is true that the Catholic Church views suicide as a sin, but I think it's pretty evident that this priest's action was not any random suicide at all. So I would agree with your analysis on that.
And I think you can also call it back to in the Bible, Jesus exorcises a man, and the demon is sent into some pigs, and the pigs run off a cliff and die. And I think you can also make that tie back there, where Jesus in the Bible is clearly performing that action for good. So I think that's meant to be a direct comparison to establish that this is a good thing. All in all. But it's a point up for interpretation. Watch the film and find out for yourself, boys and girls, and those otherwise defined. All right.
Christian Nana?
Before we move on to final thoughts, I do want to talk about score real quick and sound design. The score was nominated for an Academy Award. This movie was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It was the first horror movie to ever be nominated for Best Picture. So I want to talk about what we think of the score. Most people, when they think of The Exorcist, think of Tubular Bells. That sort of key musical piece by Mike Oldfield that really only plays once or twice in the movie. But what do we think of the actual score itself? The sort of high whistling, often ambient score that wouldn't necessarily be qualified as music by a lot of people, maybe.
Oh,
it is fall time. It is fall time.
I am not that bad, Zach. It is music.
All right.
I don't know. It seems pretty subjectively objective, but anyway. The fall themes are here. That piano, I was vibing to that when she was walking down the street. That was like that was the best part. The whole movie, the best part, walking down the street. Piano.
Okay. Well, that is Tubular Bells, so it's a great soundtrack as well.
A lack of nothing happening, and then just blah, 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 blah. Suck the blah and the blah. that also best part. But anyway.
Okay.
Well, I don't have much to add to that. I feel like I didn't notice it as much as I typically notice a score, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that just I was watching it more for the film, and oftentimes, as Zach will be the first of us to tell you, I think, a wallpapery score that fills in the empty space but isn't so obtrusive that it disrupts what's going on in front of you is a good score for a film. So I think it works fine.
Yeah. I will say I think the score works perfectly within the movie in that it doesn't really distract you. You can kind of pick out key motifs and moments that really work. I think the Muslim call to prayer at the beginning of the film has sort of been lent a certain context by events since this movie came out, but I think it's a really effective piece within the moment. I do think it really helps to build tension and introduce us to the setting of the movie and the tone of the movie in a lot of ways.
I think it works totally fine, absent of events that have followed, honestly.
Yes, I'm just saying, there's a lot of people who watch this movie and they go, the Muslim call to prayer at the beginning. It does sort of...
1973, viewer.
It is sort of a bit of a surprise, I guess, for a modern viewer that the film starts with that. But there's also moments with just screeching violins. It's a very effective noise score, where the score sort of exemplifies your sort of inner feelings within the moment, where the score itself, in moments where you're going, oh my God, is going, oh my God, like it really does kind of add to how you feel in the moment, which is why it blends in so well. But I love listening to this score when I'm writing. I think it really gets me in a headspace to write. So I would really encourage people to go out and listen to the soundtrack, because you recognize so many little details in it that just kind of blend into the film overall when you're watching it.
Mitchell, I interrupted the soundtrack, write a devotional poem about Cookie Pocket and send it into us, and you may be featured on a future episode of Cookie Pocket.
We get a lot of submissions. We'll come back to you in 6 months.
Yeah, we want to get some interaction going here.
Yeah.
Smash that like button. And make sure to hit the bell for notifications.
Oh no, what have I done?
We'll be sent to high school.
What were you going to say though, Mitchell?
Oh, it was just another joke. I'm sorry. I got to stop.
Oh, all right. Killed your
It was about holy water and dun 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 dun. Yeah, that's what it was about. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Well, do we have any final thoughts before we move on to our other segments?
Go watch this. I mean, it is a master class. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterwork. It's masterful. It's really good. Just
William Friedkin is a master.
Yeah, 4.5 out of 5, and that's just because I'm a pedantic jerk. It's basically perfect. Go watch it.
All right.
My
Mitchell.
enjoyment is as big as a ship's mast. There you go. Get out.
That's your thought, okay?
Get out. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a really good film, and watching it with somebody who hates horror movies and watching her.
Yes.
It's kind of not really suffer because, like we talked about. I mean, they don't need the jump scare stuff. I mean, that's a pretty common thing now. We don't really need anything to be shocking as much as it is shocking, but immediately shocking as it needs to be built up and savored, and kind of just every sequence just feels so authentic and feels like it just feels like you're taking the most human aspects of life itself and just twisting it in the worst possible ways, and I think that it does a magnificent job. So pretty much necessary for any film fan in general. I mean, I think it's a really good segue for people who don't like horror films as much, because there's really not a whole lot that's like scary, like you had said, Zach, much like a horror drama. So yeah, if you've come off of like Castle or Chicago Fire or NCIS, perhaps a little bit more blood, a little bit more, Bible stuff,
Don't forget NCIS New Orleans.
All right,
Law and
blood
Order.
And Bible stuff. That's definitely a pull quote.
Oh, jeez.
Castle's really good, guys. Nathan Fillion top tier. All right.
Okay. Well, I definitely do recommend this movie as well. No surprise there. It is great. And I will agree. It's sort of like, it reminds me in a lot of ways of like Silence of the Lambs, where it is a horror movie, but it's also just a really, really, really good movie. So even if you're not into scary movies, I think you could still watch this and enjoy it despite the potentially unpleasant or horrifying moments. And I'm also going to drop a recommendation, one of many, for Exorcist 3, because it really is very, very good.
Screw the second one. Go straight to the third, just for Zach.
I'm serious. You really don't need to see the second one. The second one is terrible. If you want to watch it, seek it out. But the third one, it's written and directed by William Peter Blatty. It's based on his sequel to The Exorcist. it really is worth checking out. I know it being a second sequel, a lot of people are going to go, oh, it's probably just a rip off the original, but it's totally different. I'm going to try and get it on this show at some point, but whether or not we do another one of these Halloween specials, but don't wait for us. Seek it out on your own. Watch both of these films and enjoy them. And we're going to enjoy now the week in review. More like the month or two in review. But guys, what have you been watching or listening or reading in the past 2 months, however long it's been since we put out Hereditary?
Is stuffed like the turducken from regular shows Thanksgiving special.
Sans wishbone.
Yes, sans wishbone. No. That's a deep cut.
I lost the election. No. All right, keep going.
Oh my god. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna try to keep it spooky themed because this is our Halloween special. I just watched yesterday. It premiered on Disney Plus yesterday. Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales.
How terrifying.
A Star Wars Halloween special. It's 45 minutes long. It's very goofy. It's not canon at all. And it's like Poe Dameron and BB-8 have some X-Wing troubles. And they land on Mustafar and wander into Darth Vader's castle and are treated by several spooky stories, including a Kylo Ren story, a Darth Maul and General Grievous story, and a Luke Skywalker story. And it's kind of like, it's kind of just content, honestly. Like, parts of it are funny, but they did a Christmas special last year, and I actually quite enjoyed that. It was original, and it had more interesting characters involved, and it was just funnier. And this one was just kind of there for me. I gave it a 2.5. I liked it because I like Star Wars, but like, if you're like a Star Wars completionist, I would say go for it. But if not, Star Wars Visions deserves your attention much, much more. The anime short films that were produced by a plethora of Japanese anime studios, and they're all really good, and some of them are absolutely fantastic. So give those a try instead.
All right.
Someday I will when I have time. So I read the Ranger Handbook. You all want to learn about platoon tactics in the Army?
How horrifying.
I'm ready.
I give it a
Send
half
me on
a
the
star.
The military-industrial complex.
Yay! I watched Girl Strip. No, I watched The Hangover. Okay. No. I watched all the Toy Stories. I watched Shrek. I watched Alvin and the Chipmunks, Captain Marvel. I watched Over the Hedge, Bill Wirtz's History of Japan, Back to the Future trilogy. I'm not reviewing any of those.
Okay.
Just wanted to let you know.
What are you reviewing?
What I'm about to watch in like 10 minutes.
Which
are you
is?
Ready?
I don't know. Am I?
Blair Witch Project. We're keeping the theme. Don't worry. Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project is slowly becoming a cult classic for me and myself and I. All right. I am heavily enjoying this, and I have no idea why. It just feels so realistic. I went to a couple of my friends, and I actually went to where it was filmed, and that place is spooky. That's a spooky place, okay? And I was like taking pictures and stuff. I was doing photography stuff, and like that's a great forest to film in, Zach. So give it a try someday. But I do not want to get lost in those woods. The trees are very menacing. But anyway, yes, highly recommend this movie. It is obviously kind of a documentary type found footage film. And this, I think, is one of the best. I would say it's the best I've ever seen. Honestly, I don't really think there's any other films that come close. It's framed perfectly. It was marketed perfectly. It was marketed to convince people that it was real by this new thing called the internet. And it was perfectly marketed. It was all everybody's first time doing everything in it. It was so raw, and it was so like it was like a prequel to the Briefcase, Zach. Okay, if you could somehow connect the Briefcase to Blair Witch Project, and we can just pretend all the other sequels and crap that happened after didn't exist, do it somehow. Okay.
Okay.
This is a movie that shows nothing. Okay, there's nothing until even the very end shows nothing. All right, I don't care. Nothing. You don't get anything. It's just freaking out. People just freaking out, and you don't know what's going on, but you kind of know what's going on, and it's just the fear of the unknown. It's crazy. The fear of the unknown takes full advantage of it. Highly recommend it. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. That's all I want to say.
Now I'm thinking of connections between the briefcase and the middle. What if Jenna is the Blair Witch?
Ooh.
This is a compelling thought. I'll work on this later. I weirdly have not been watching a great deal of spooky stuff since our last episode. I've watched some here and there, but I've kind of been concentrating more on science fiction in the lead up to Dune, which will have come out by the time this episode comes out. But I did recently start watching Dark Shadows, which, for those who don't know, is a horror soap opera that only had 3 seasons, but it broadcast every single day at 4 p.m. So there's over 1,200 episodes. And at the beginning, they're very slow, and very little happens in them. There's an entire episode where someone has a conversation at the pub and then goes home. So it is very much a soap opera, despite kind of the horror, spooky stuff. And it will very much test your patience. It's testing mine. But I hope it picks up throughout its run and kind of lives up to its iconic reputation, because I've been meaning to watch it for a while, and I've finally started taking the plunge, and I really hope I don't regret it, because boy howdy, I got a lot of episodes left. So I will update in 4 years when I finally get to the end of the show. Maybe. We'll see if we do another Halloween special. If not, this will be the only time you ever hear of Dark Shadows. It's a big dedication, but if you are interested in kind of gothic horror, sort of like if the Addams Family took itself absolutely seriously and had no comedy in it, except for unintentional comedy, where like a crew member accidentally stumbles on screen and then walks back off, or a boom mic falls into shot, which can be kind of funny, then it might be for you. All right. Now, unusually, we do not have any other segments this episode. We've decided to retire... Ooh. Christian.
Me and Christian
You're giving me surprised eyes. What's happening?
We are very mad at Zach right now. Intense staring.
Do you hear that, Mitchell? Do you?
No, I don't. I hear a lost Cookie Pocket member.
I hear a beep, 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 beep.
Oh my god.
In the distance. What is that?
Oh. You see that?
You thought you could get away, Zach.
You see what I did?
You really did.
My computer thinks I'm playing music right now. That's how good that was. It says set up professional audio and audio settings. I have no idea what that is.
Yes, it is the rundown. Here today and also here tomorrow.
Steve Harvey was too scared and ran away.
Okay, that's probably
I'm about to run away.
Best. So we got 1 minute. We got a list of stuff, and Zach's gonna give a number for each stuff.
Yeah.
Mitchell, are you ready?
Oh yeah.
All right. I'm gonna have you start in 3, 2, 1, go.
2-factor maiden name verification.
4 out of 5.
Star Wars alumnus Max von Sydow.
3 out of 5.
In the temporal lobe, it's very common.
3 out of 5.
College protests.
4 out of 5.
Trying to be a film director and dying by witchcraft.
5 out of 5.
Carl.
4 out of 5.
Harvard education.
3 out of 5.
No rats.
3 out of 5.
Harry Truman portrait.
4 out of 5.
Loving to talk film, to discuss, to critique.
5 out of 5.
Introduction to theology lab.
4 out of 5.
Chad priests.
3 out of 5.
Marrying pizza.
3 out of 5.
Kids Choice Award slime.
3 out of 5.
Protesting about arbitrary things.
3 out of 5.
The power of Christ that compels you.
4 out of 5.
Alien pubic hair.
4 out of 5.
Needles.
4 out of 5.
Candle for aesthetic.
3 out of 5.
Zack Snyder thinking he's as good as William Friedkin.
2 out of 5.
COVID vaccines.
3 out of 5.
Defenestration.
3 out of 5.
Keeping drugs in your house.
2 out of 5.
Tap water 4D chess.
3 out of 5.
A doctor proposing religion.
4 out of 5.
Woodstock.
3 out of 5.
Demon child abuse.
3 out of 5.
1 second. Time.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get
That's
to
right.
one of them.
We didn't even talk about Max. Okay, before we leave, I just want to say the makeup on Max von Sydow is incredible, because he was in his 30s when they made this movie, and he just looks how he looked when he died. It's amazing.
What?
So many people watch this movie, and they're like, that wasn't an old man? It's incredible. It's like the best old age makeup I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also,
Well,
he's just a great actor. Too.
he is. He's just an incredible actor. He's only in like a handful of scenes of this movie, but he makes such an impact. He is the Exorcist, and everybody remembers, the power of Christ compels you, because he brings just that gravitas to it.
Totally. Too bad he's dead. Yeah.
Thank you for killing the vibe, Mitchell.
And he's probably going to heaven.
Thank you.
Okay.
VeggieTale
The
number
end.
3048. Yep.
Well, this is the end of another episode of Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film. Our first Halloween special, maybe our last Halloween special. But, enjoy the season, booze and ghouls. Go out and watch some horror films. Scare some trick-or-treaters. I don't know, do young person things.
You talked about booze, and I was getting a little worried there. But you meant like spooky booze, not... Oh, no.
I don't think I said... Oh, I see. I see,
no.
yes. Well, that ties into doing young person things. Enjoy yourselves this Halloween.
Don't add or subtract to the population.
Try not to add or
that's a good
subtract
idea.
of the population. And we hope that we could be a small part of you enjoying this Halloween as well. So without further ado, good night.